Sometimes, life presents us with situations that challenge our worldview. Have you ever made a decision out of compassion and, instead of receiving recognition, faced criticism or, worse, were harmed? That's exactly what happened to Thomas, a humble gas station attendant who faced the harsh reality of caring for his family while keeping his honesty intact every single day. He paid for an elderly woman's food after she forgot her wallet, a gesture that seemed simple but triggered a series of unimaginable events. What would you do if, by trying to help someone, your life was turned upside down? Thomas had to endure the pain of being fired but never lost the empathy he carried in his heart. What he didn't know was that his actions were about to be recognized in a way that would completely rewrite the narrative of his story. What if I told you that a simple act of compassion can transform an entire life? Stay with me, because what comes next is proof that honesty and kindness are never in vain. Thomas was the kind of person who, even while facing hardships, never lost his empathy. As a gas station attendant, he understood that small gestures could make a big difference. That's why, when assisting an elderly woman who had forgotten her wallet at home, he made a decision few would. Without a second thought, he paid for the fuel out of his own pocket, saying with a smile, "You take care of your family, and I'll take care of this today." A compassionate act that, to many, might seem small but revealed the greatness of his heart. That gesture was filled with honesty and a deep understanding of the embarrassment such situations can cause. He went beyond the moment. He saw a vulnerable person in need of help and chose to act. Imagine how the world would be if more people took similar actions, expecting nothing in return. A practical example? Buy a coffee for someone in line or help a stranger carry their bags. Acts like these not only impact those who receive them but also transform those who perform them. Thomas understood the value of caring for family. He himself fought every day to provide for his own, despite financial difficulties. That's why the thought of leaving that woman in a tough spot didn't sit right with him. Sometimes, it's in the midst of adversity that a person's true essence is revealed. Those who have experienced tough times know how comforting it is to find someone willing to help without expecting anything in return. The surprised look on the elderly woman's face was something Thomas would never forget. It was as if she had witnessed something rare, a level of genuine honesty that disarmed any doubt. For him, the gratitude she showed was reward enough. And you, have you ever witnessed someone do something so selfless that it left a lasting impression? These moments are rare but precious. Thomas didn't expect recognition or applause. He acted because he believed that kindness shouldn't be measured, but multiplied. The woman, in turn, left with a lighter heart, perhaps even carrying a lesson she'd keep for the rest of her life. Thomas's gesture proved that no matter where you are, it's always possible to do good. After all, how often do we underestimate the impact of a simple action? This type of attitude is often misunderstood by those watching from the outside. There are people who fail to grasp the motivation behind an empathetic act. But what Thomas knew, and many don't, is that an action driven by compassion is never wasted. Life has a curious way of bringing kindness back to us, even in unexpected ways. And so, Thomas's fate began to change even without his knowledge. His sincere and selfless gesture would soon have an impact far beyond what he could imagine. However, not everyone around him would understand his actions, which would soon bring consequences Thomas could never have foreseen. While Thomas saw his act as something natural, some of his coworkers thought quite differently. The moment they found out he had paid for the elderly woman's fuel, they began whispering among themselves. "How can he just trust anyone like that?" one mocked. They doubted the woman's honesty, insinuating that she might have been lying. Thomas heard the comments but chose not to respond. After all, he understood that not everyone viewed the world through the lens of empathy. To these colleagues, acts of compassion were synonymous with naivety. Used to mistrusting others' intentions, they believed Thomas should have been more clever. How often does society teach us to be skeptical, as if caring for others and taking risks are signs of weakness? Thomas, however, knew his gesture was genuine and that honesty outweighed any premature judgment. The comments didn't stop there. "Did you do it just to show off?" one of the attendants sneered. Thomas replied calmly, "I did it because it was the right thing to do. If it were my grandmother, "I'd hope someone would do the same." His response momentarily silenced the group, but it didn't erase the skepticism deeply rooted in many of them. This situation raises a question: how often do we avoid doing good out of fear of what others might think? Despite the criticism, Thomas didn't let it shake him. He knew that those who act with integrity don't need external validation. Many of his colleagues, however, chose to judge without seeking to understand his motives. It's interesting how, even in simple environments, a spirit of competition and distrust can take over. And you, have you ever noticed how others' opinions can stifle even the noblest gestures? Thomas understood that the malicious comments stemmed more from his coworkers' internal struggles than from any fair analysis of his actions. It was as if each of them projected their frustrations and insecurities onto him. Instead of retaliating, he used the experience to strengthen his resolve. Doing good doesn't depend on external approval but on an internal sense of purpose. Thomas's silence in the face of criticism wasn't submission but wisdom. He knew that words spoken in the heat of the moment wouldn't change opinions hardened by life's difficulties. And perhaps, deep down, his coworkers also knew they'd never have the courage to do what he did. That's something that causes discomfort, when someone's honesty reminds us of what we lack. Even so, the atmosphere grew heavier. The gossip reached management's ears, and the story was distorted. Little did Thomas know that the consequences of his good deed were about to rewrite the narrative of his life. What began as an act of compassion quickly turned into a major misunderstanding. The gas station management was informed through workplace gossip, but the story arrived completely twisted. According to the rumors, Thomas had allowed the elderly woman to fill up her tank without paying, with no mention of the fact that he had covered the cost himself. The decision was swift and cold. Thomas was fired. The news hit him like a bucket of cold water, but he kept his head high, trusting that his honesty would eventually speak for itself. Being fired for an act of kindness is an irony many might struggle to comprehend. Even so, Thomas knew he had done the right thing. Honesty had always been his priority, even in the face of the hardship this job loss would bring. Caring for his family was already difficult, and now it seemed nearly impossible. Yet, he didn't let anger consume him. Instead, he reflected, does the world really punish those who do good? If you've ever faced something unjust, you know that sometimes it's at rock bottom that we find the strength to rise again. The impact on Thomas's life was immediate. With his income gone, he began to worry about paying bills and, most of all, providing for his family. But instead of surrendering to despair, he chose to hold on to his dignity. My conscience is clear, he reminded himself. And that's how many people overcome adversity, by focusing on what they can control. Have you ever taken a moment to list your options when everything seems lost? It's often the first step to regaining control. The management gave Thomas a chance to explain the situation. However, it was easier for them to believe the rumors than to understand the truth. How often do we judge others without knowing their full story? Thomas, however, bore no resentment. He knew that even in adversity, honesty and empathy are virtues that cannot be stripped away. Hardship may hurt, but it also teaches lessons that only the resilient can learn. Thomas's family responded with unwavering support. They reminded him that a job could be lost, but character remains. And that's something anyone can take to heart. Your integrity is worth more than any position or paycheck. Life is bigger than this moment, his wife said. Perhaps you, too, have heard similar words from someone close during tough times. It's those words that keep us going. Thomas knew he needed to act quickly, not just to provide for his household, but to ensure that this situation wouldn't define him. He began searching for opportunities, reaching out to connections, and holding on to the hope that the universe would find a way to set things right. In such moments, it's essential to remember that every action counts. Sending a resume, making a phone call, or even having a casual conversation can open unexpected doors. Little did Thomas know, his noble gesture was about to be recognized in a way he could never have imagined. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, a turning point was beginning to unfold. A few days after being fired, Thomas received an unexpected call. On the other end of the line, a young man introduced himself as the grandson of the elderly woman he had helped. With a voice filled with emotion, he expressed his deep gratitude. Asterisk, my grandmother told me what you did for her. I don't have the words to thank you enough, asterisk, the young man said. That call brought an unexpected sense of relief to Thomas, who felt, at least, that his compassion hadn't been in vain. The young man asked to meet Thomas in person. He wanted to look into the eyes of the attendant who, without hesitation, had shown more empathy than many would. Thomas accepted the invitation with humility, unaware of the impact his gesture had had on the elderly woman's family. This serves as a valuable reminder: the good we do can echo far beyond the moment we act. Have you ever thought about how many lives could be touched by a single act of kindness? During their meeting, the young man shared how his grandmother had come home deeply moved. Asterisk, my grandmother has always taught us about honesty and caring for family. When she met someone like you, who lives by those values, it felt like life was rewarding her, asterisk, he said. Thomas listened attentively, feeling more appreciated than ever. It's amazing how simple gestures can restore people's faith in humanity. The family's gratitude wasn't just expressed in words. The young man wanted to do more to repay Thomas's kindness. You deserve better than what happened at your job, he affirmed. That statement sparked a glimmer of hope in Thomas, who began to realize that even in dark times, life can surprise us. Perhaps you've experienced something similar, where someone's gratitude changed how you viewed a difficult moment. The young man also shared how his grandmother couldn't stop talking about Thomas's courage and empathy. To her, he wasn't just a gas station attendant but an example of character in challenging times. Those words deeply touched Thomas, who realized that his recent struggles hadn't been in vain. Sometimes, the most meaningful recognition comes from those who see who we truly are. At the end of their meeting, the young man shared something that left Thomas intrigued. I also work at a gas station, but things might be different for you now, he said, without giving too many details. That statement lingered in Thomas's mind as he made his way home. It felt as though a new chapter was about to begin, one he could never have imagined. Though he didn't know exactly what to expect, Thomas sensed that the family's gratitude was more than just a gesture of affection, it was a bridge to something greater. The future seemed more promising, even if the details were still unclear. And as life loves to surprise us, what seemed like a simple thank you was about to turn into a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Days after the meeting, Thomas received a life-changing proposal. The young man, the grandson of the elderly woman, revealed that he was the owner of a network of gas stations. He explained that his family upheld strong values of empathy and honesty, and Thomas's gesture perfectly reflected those principles. I want you on my team, but not as an attendant, he said with a smile. He offered Thomas a managerial position, emphasizing that his character was far more valuable than any formal experience on paper. Thomas was speechless. Just days earlier, he had been worried about how to support his family after being fired, and now he was being offered an opportunity beyond anything he could have imagined. Life has a way of delivering unexpected turns that remind us how good deeds always find a way to come back. How often do we underestimate our ability to overcome hardships because we're stuck in the difficulty of the moment? Thomas now saw that his suffering wasn't the end but a turning point. The new job brought more than financial stability, it was a chance for Thomas to grow and inspire others. On his first day, he was introduced to the team as someone who embodied the company's core values. Asterisk, Thomas isn't here by luck. He's here because he represents the kind of person we want by our side, asterisk, the young owner said. This introduction deeply moved Thomas, who felt that his compassion and honesty were finally being acknowledged. As a manager, Thomas began implementing practices that emphasized empathy in the workplace. He understood how important it was to care for each employee, especially the attendants who often endured exhausting shifts with little recognition. He organized regular meetings where team members could share challenges and suggest improvements. Asterisk, caring for family goes beyond home. Here, we're also a family, asterisk, he said, inspiring his team. The impact was immediate. The new approach not only improved business outcomes but also created a more welcoming environment. Employees who had previously felt demotivated now saw Thomas as a role model. Have you ever thought about how you could use your experiences to improve the lives of those around you? Sometimes, a word of encouragement or a simple gesture of recognition can change someone's day. Even in his new position, Thomas never forgot where he came from. He remained humble, treating everyone with the same kindness he had shown to the elderly woman that day. His success didn't change his essence but reinforced his commitment to the values that had always guided his actions. After all, integrity is something money can't buy. Thomas, who started this journey with a simple act of compassion, had now become living proof that honesty and empathy can transform lives. His story wasn't just about overcoming adversity, it was about how caring for others can lead us to places we never imagined. And so, the cycle of kindness he had begun returned to him in an even greater way. Thomas's story teaches us something we often forget: the impact of our actions goes far beyond the present moment. When you lead with compassion and honesty, the universe finds ways to bring it back to you, even if the journey feels challenging at first. Have you ever stopped to think about how small gestures of yours might transform someone else's life, and your own as well? How many opportunities might you be missing out on because of the fear of staying true to your values? Now let me ask you, when was the last time you made a decision driven by empathy, even knowing it might draw criticism? Are you doing enough to care for the people around you, be it your family, friends, or even strangers? Reflect on that. Perhaps the answer lies in something simple yet life-changing. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Which part moved you the most? I'd love to know. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you'll always find stories and reflections that might just change the way you see the world, and maybe even the way you live.